There's no other way to put this. That was a missed opportunity. With the greatest of respect to Crystal Palace, they're in the relegation zone, and they were missing 4 really key players: Eza, Wharton, Kamada, and Nketiah. That's now 6 winless in all competitions, which is one of the worst spells in the 900-plus game managerial career of Unai Emery. What is going on? I have some ideas. Presented by 24/7 Services, let's pick through Aston Villa 2, Crystal Palace 2. Welcome inside the parlor, and this past international window was a productive one in this house as my Sandra and I went into full Christmas decorating lockdown. You may have noticed the parlor tree up off the top, but I had no choice because Villa's in this stretch of games now where we have 8 over the coming 28 days. That is a relentless pre-Christmas schedule, and I truly believed we were going to beat Crystal Palace on Saturday. And then we would have had that wonderful sense of relief. Like when you check and then string up 5,000 Christmas lights and see them all come on when you flick the switch for the first time. Instead, the angst that was intensifying a little bit before the international window just kind of ratcheted up a little bit more because the same issues that were plaguing us prior to the break reappeared against a team that suddenly seems to have our number. And the international break did us no favors injury-wise as well. We could have used Amadou Onana, who would have matched up nicely with JP Mateta, who was almost playing as much as a link man as he was the lone frontrunner. But injuries, as Unai Emery pointed out this week, is something that affects every team in the Premier League. No excuses. My 2 correspondents were not at the game on Saturday. Samir's in India, and Alex Dutton had a gig with Atarka that night, so I have no footage to share from Saturday, which was just really bad planning by me. The standards of this program are dropping shockingly as I recap Aston Villa 2, Crystal Palace 2. And the key numbers will not help alleviate this sense of opportunity lost when you see the XG, which was inflated by the penalty, of course, but shots off target included the Bailey crossbar. You don't get credit for a shot on there. We still need to do better, though, when we're in shooting range. 4 big chances created, 3 missed, and look at the tackles 1 category. Palace is a physically assertive side, but with us on home soil, that is a wide margin, and it was obvious as well in real time. Form is always just temporary, but it is clear to me at this stage of the season, we miss Moussa Diaby's pace, directness, technical ability, and finish. And we also miss Douglas Luiz, at least the first half of last year's Douglas Luiz. I'm convinced he found out he was leaving somehow after February, and that impacted the second half of his season. And here's where Aston Villa is punished for not having as big a ground as some of the others and not having more turnover, even though we have 0 debt and the club just pumped another $50 million into the enterprise this week. We have to be more strategic, more clever than anybody else around us if we want to compete on all fronts. I hate to single anybody out, especially Morgan Rogers, because he's a local kid and he's got a huge ceiling. And it's funny how the media in England is always about 2 months behind or so, because they're still bigging up Rogers right now. The commentators are just lavishing him with praise without having looked at some pretty serious statistical data that maybe tells a different story, the way I did during my Liverpool recap, because this is a significant issue, maybe the biggest one in our team right now. We are not connecting midfield with our forwards as effortlessly as we have since Unai Emery arrived. And it's not all on Morgan Rogers, but that is a major component of his role. I could read off all the stats of Morgan Rogers on Saturday, so could you, but I don't want to sound like I have an agenda against this guy, because I don't. And I don't want to pile on a 22-year-old who is learning a very nuanced position with his club on the job in the Premier League. I could show you clips of where he lost the ball, when he lost the ball, how he lost the ball, but I'd sound like a broken record because I've been saying this for well over a month now. So despite the new contract, despite his first senior England call-up, there is no escaping the cold, hard reality that Morgan Rogers has been ineffective of late, and he's having a difficult time finding his feet at the moment. We've seen more than one player transform under Unai Emery, and we know there's a period of adjustment when a player's being asked to take on a new role. And we also know that Morgan Rogers is known for his willingness to onboard information. But you could see it, and you can see it for a while now. We are lacking fluency going forward. And as much as everybody believes in Rogers, and I feel like it's still coming at some point, you do wonder how much patience the football hierarchy has with trying to adapt a new player in that role versus finding a more ready-made solution. I only bring that up because the Alex Baena rumors have resurfaced again, where apparently Monchi is trying to wrap up the pre-contract in December so that we can bring in the Villarreal playmaker in January. €50 million release clause. This number 10 second striker position is absolutely paramount in Unai Emery's system, and it is by far and obviously the biggest difference between this year and last. And a great example of just where Morgan Rogers is struggling right now, whether he's getting into position or not. Here he has a half chance. I think this is the only half chance he has in the entire game, and he completely whiffs on it. Unai Emery said publicly he needs goals and assists out of that position and his number 27. Since arriving 2 years ago, this is easily the most frustrated I've seen Unai Emery. I mean, when does he have a go at a fourth official? That's just not in his nature, but he did on Saturday. After the game, his Sky Sports interview was extremely curt, bordering almost on rude. I mean, 2- and 3-word answers, that's just not like him. The problems are plain for everybody to see. It's obvious, getting hit on transition, not being ruthless in front of goal, not punishing opponents' mistakes. And he spent pretty much the entire international window at Bodymore Heath working on all those problems. But at some point, it's up to the players when they step across the white line. On a very positive note, the 1-1 goal was simply brilliant, and it changed the entire complexion of the game and the mood in Villa Park. Basically, 2 passes and a great first touch by Ollie Watkins. Pau Torres, this is almost a volley. I mean, it's his first touch, really. The ball's in the sky. He somehow pelts it through a maze of players. Most footballers don't even see that pass. Then John McGinn did a great job accepting the pass before spinning it in right in front of Ollie Watkins so that his first touch can take him around the goalkeeper. I think Unai Emery wants to score a lot more goals just like this, straight up the middle of the park, and I'd certainly like to see more goals like that. Also encouraging, we saw glimpses of the old Leon Bailey on Saturday, but unfortunately it didn't come until half-time. That first half was really difficult for our jinky Jamaican, but he did draw the penalty, and then he reappeared and started causing problems. But he also played 163 minutes for his country over 2 games and lots of travel, and we need him on Wednesday. And I feel like Unai Emery's hand was forced a little bit now because of periodization and load management. Oh, the weather outside Villa Park was indeed frightful on Saturday, and that was after a dusting of snow in the Midlands. I was very jealous as some of my Brummie friends sent their photos in, which put them in a festive frame of mind. We don't get a lot of snow here on the west coast of Canada, which makes me sad. Then again, nobody around here knows how to drive in it. Now, a couple of weeks ago, there was no snow involved in a 24/7 services project at the Central Co-op, where unfortunately a driver thought that there was a drive-through option there. You'd have to go pretty fast to cause this level of damage, but obviously this is a serious reactive call that requires immediate attention because This co-op location is now unsecure. It's wide open. And just look at the completed work after. I mean, matching up the exterior the way they did, you'd have never known there was an accident. Think about all the trades that would have been involved here as well, because there probably would have been some electrical, maybe some plumbing, and everything else in between. Not to mention they had to turn this around quickly to get this location back up and running. And this is why a huge chain like Co-op puts its faith and trust in Paul Handsaker and his Villa Mad 24/7 crew. Listen, you never want to call 24/7 services for emergencies. That's not why you want to call them. But it's good to know that if you do have one, they'll pick up the phone in Liverpool, Manchester, and Birmingham. And you can get those numbers on the company website or in the description of these videos. I think a pretty major issue, but in a game that was way too transitional for either manager's liking, wouldn't it have been nice to have either Amadou Onana or Boubacar Kamara to choose from? Because it was so easy for Crystal Palace to play through us and counter into wide open spaces. Yuri Tielemans is not that kind of player, and Ross Barkley isn't either. They're very similar, those two players, and we had no other choice because of injury. And thanks to Ezri Konsa's knock on England duty, another player who is a rapid, recovering defender who gives us a little bit more insurance in those kind of transitional moments. Major moment. In fact, I went back and forth debating on whether this should have been the number one, but it wasn't in the context of the game. Still, Emi Martinez's 80th minute save on Jeffrey Schlupp was absolutely incredible. Again, this looks so easy and so open, but just look at how important this glove is to preserving at least the draw, because if that goes in there, we're talking about 5 straight losses in all competitions, a first for Unai Emery, and full Villa Nation meltdown mode. Big issue number 3. Neither nor. The worst thing your team could be, or the worst phase that you can go through, is where you are ineffective in both penalty areas. So you're not defending well and getting clean sheets, and you're not burying your big chances. Now, we have conceded the first goal in 8 of our 12 Premier League games, in this case, an early one. In our best runs and phases under Unai Emery since he arrived, we score first, and we either see that through, or we get that second goal as the other team is chasing the result. And even though we have proven we can overturn a deficit and even win games late, in a packed schedule where you're also playing Champions League, you don't want to get into those kind of situations. You don't want to have to expend unnecessary energy chasing games all the time. On the opening goal, Ross Barkley steps in and gets the ball but can't retain it, and then he has to decide, well, do I go after it or do I drop? He kind of does neither nor. Same thing with Yuri Tielemans. He runs to the danger player and then isn't there in time, so he's caught in no man's land. Neither nor. We're not a hard pressing team. We're not a mid to low block team. We're neither nor. And this is not an indictment of Unai Emery's system. Listen, the sample size confirms his pedigree. That's not on trial here. But based on the squad that we have and that we're able to have, we also have to position players in a way that they can get the most out of their attributes. And Morgan Rogers is a perfect example. I mean, up until now, he's not really been a number 10. He's not a striker. He's not a midfielder. He's not a winger. He's neither nor. And we have to get these players playing in their best positions so that they can contribute. When you take a step back and look at the cold hard evidence that's right there in front of us for all to see, a bad run like this usually comes down to one of two things. It's either a systems or tactical problem, or it could be personnel and squad issues. And in this particular case, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt to the manager because he's been there and done that before, arguably with a less talented squad, the one he inherited from Steven Gerrard. He does the training work, the video work. I mean, the players are given everything they need. So at this moment in time, and without any of us knowing the true financial constraints we have on building our squad, I think it's the squad that's getting found out, not the manager. Big moment number 2, corner counter. This was an astounding turn of events in this game. I mean, think about it. If Youri Tielemans had put the ball into the north stand, it would have been a goal kick, and maybe it would have been 1-1 at halftime. Instead, we are caught on the counter from an attacking corner for the third time in 2 games. And this is where supporters have a right to be a little bit upset, is to see the same mistakes getting punished again and again. Now, Liverpool is built for that kind of thing. They look for it. But Crystal Palace, with the greatest of respect, yes, they press hard. Yes, they do have players that can punish you. Mateta and Sarr, of course, he gets his first goal this year against Aston Villa. But structurally, something is unsound if we get opened up that badly. The odd thing here is that the corner was actually played short. It wasn't a low ball to the near post, which was cut out. And irritating here is just the passiveness we show after the McGinn diagonal ball, and he would end up being a bit of a culprit as well. But Morgan Rogers does not fight hard enough in his duel. John McGinn is caught in absolute no man's land, not knowing whether to go for the ball or drop off. And then Youri Tielemans sprints 70 yards to try to get back into position, but ends up marking neither of the 2 players in the middle. Clever little movement by Mateta, possibly to draw Youri Tielemans over, but in the end, he marks neither. That wasn't to be Yuri's worst contribution in this game. Unfortunately, that came about 95 seconds earlier. So fans ask a fair question. How can this keep happening to us? We know the vulnerability is there. They work on it in training. They work on it in video. And you'd think after enough hard lessons, the messaging would finally get through. Because if it doesn't, that again points to a personnel problem, not a managerial problem. The manager cannot prevent individual mistakes. Only the players can do that through training, repetition, recognition, automation, and through focus and concentration. And the number 1 big moment that defined Villa 2, Palace 2, penalty problems. Oh, the penalty problems have reared their ugly head again. And we know that Youri Tielemans must be playing through some kind of an issue, and our ranks are depleted, so it's possible he actually had to play with some pain of some kind. No excuses here, but it was a very inconsistent day for our Belgian midfielder. Now, he does get credit for pinging in the ball that Ross Barkley would head into the top corner. Ironically, the exact same routine was headed over by Barkley. So credit to Tielemans. It was a great ball in. Barkley recalibrated his hard drive and this time got it spot on for the eventual equalizer. But Youri also had a few giveaways and sloppy moments that he didn't get punished for. But if you look at his pass completion percentage of 92, you'd think, well, on paper, he had a great outing, especially from 84 attempts. It's just that in his position, you know, the ones that don't come off often look worse, especially when they lead to transitional moments. Now, none of us will know what issue forced Tielemans out of the Belgian camp during this international window, and we don't know also if he's still carrying something. But just from my eyeballs and experience, it looks like something. And we've had a number of players in that situation already this season. When we were finally awarded our first league penalty of the season, thanks to a VAR review, my first thought was, yeah, Tielemans should take this, based solely on the one he took at Lille last season, which was ice cold. John McGinn has taken them for Scotland with great effect. Ollie Watkins has had a checkered history from the spot. But when this graphic appeared just before the spot kick, I got this little pang of discomfort deep in the pit of my stomach. I was a bang average goalkeeper during my youth and adult career. However, I did have an excellent record facing penalty kicks because at that level, players give tells that were really obvious to me. Two types of penalties, though, were almost impossible to save. If they were hit along the ground and firmly inside the post, you really had to get a good jump on it. And I also found that anything just under the crossbar and hit with power, almost impossible to save. Youri Tielemans, neither nor. He puts it at the most comfortable height for the goalkeeper. And that, my friend, may have been the very quick end to Yuri Tielemans' penalty-taking duties, because there was nothing about his body language. There was no confidence, no conviction whatsoever. I just simply can't see Unai Emery faffing about here, especially given the comments after the game on all of his interviews about how frustrated he was with that penalty miss. I predict that if John McGinn's on the field next time, the captain will be taking it. Don't want to cry over spilt milk, but I had a feeling we might miss Dougie's ruthlessness from the spot. All of them went in except for the Olympiacos one. He mixed up his locations. He staggered his run-ups. It looked like he really took seriously the art of being a penalty taker, and that's not how it looked with Yuri Tielemans. And with the stakes being so high in the game right now, you're not going to get a second chance when a penalty is that poor. And credit to Henderson, he had to make the save, got a great jump, managed to stay compliant by trailing his back foot. If that shot is along the ground, it's 2-1 Villa, and just think about the mentality at that stage just before halftime. You got a team in the bottom three suddenly having to chase the game, and you got a team now in the top three that's probably feeling pretty confident about themselves. The Sill Hill Brewery star performer was difficult to pick again this week for all the wrong reasons, but I'm giving it to Ross Barkley because he had a contribution without which we would have had a lot of Aston Villa fans drowning their sorrows in copious amounts of delicious, award-winning Birmingham brewed beer. I'm pouring Ross a Superstar West Coast IPA. Pale, yet bright, kind of like Ross, because you know he does perspire profusely. Big, bold, blonde, with an addictive finish, just like his glancing header. Have you been to the Sill Hill Tap Room in Aston after a Villa game? It's only a 25-minute walk or a 5-minute Uber ride in the rain. Kind of like Alan Crampton, my pal, did after the game on Saturday. And an evening with champions is finally here this Friday. There are still some tickets left, I believe. I put a link in the description of this video. And the Sill Hill Tap Room will be open before and after the Juventus game on Wednesday. Gulp. Updating the cumulative numbers I like to keep track of. 9 points dropped from 6 home games already. So we've taken only half the available points at Villa Park thus far. That is a far cry from the run-in at the end of the 23 season to the start of the 24 season. Not fortress-like in the league, at least. Watkins finally adding to his tally again. We scored from a set piece. We got a VAR decision in our favor and our first penalty in the process. But conceding first again meant no clean sheet, and overall we are now at 0 in goal difference after 12 games. Given the fixture list, that's both surprising and a bit underwhelming. The good news is we have a distraction from our league doldrums with an absolutely crackling Match Week 5 Champions League showdown against one of the biggest clubs in Europe, Juventus. An Aston Villa win would help solidify a top 8 spot at the moment, but a Juventus win would leapfrog the Italian giants past us and into the top 8. Now, apart from one moment in one game, Aston Villa has looked every bit the seasoned Champions League campaigner. But given the recent league form and the onset of a couple of untimely injuries, I could understand why certain supporters might view this game with a little bit of apprehension. We know it won't be a Dougie derby, as Luiz has been ruled out through injury, which does give me a strange sense of comfort knowing he can't come back to haunt us somehow, because, imagine the meltdown if that had been the case. But we might still see Weston McKennie, who was roundly poo-pooed by a segment of the Villa fan base after initially being included in the Dougie package. Juventus does have a few other injury worries, especially up front. Vlahovic would have been a for sure starter, but also no Milik, no Gonzalez. And as for Aston Villa, we know there are small injuries to Kamara and Onana, Konza and Ramsey. We'll just have to wait and see if any of those players are available. Complicating this fixture, though, is the fact that we also have to go to Stamford Bridge the following Sunday. I mean, this is a very difficult week, which was made slightly more difficult by a 2-2 draw against Crystal Palace to start it. Before you judge those of us who put up our Christmas decorations early, remember that my alarm goes off at 7:15 and it's pitch dark. And now it gets dark at 4:15 and it's only going to get darker over the coming month. I don't know how the Norwegian Lions in our fan base deal with this time of year because it's gloomy and it doesn't help when your football club is in a bit of a funk. So the more warm, cozy, twinkling lights and shiny, glittery things that you have around the house, the easier this time of year is to deal with for people like me who struggle with diminishing daylight. Until Juventus, stay dry, warm, be awesome. Thank you for watching. And as always, up the mighty Villa!